Taliban column moving fast across a valley floor, confident the ridgeline above them is empty. It isn't. Somewhere above, a targeting system is already locked. Within seconds, 3 firing positions are ranged. What follows is an execution delivered from distances the Taliban never believed possible. What you're about to witness are the 5 most lethal open-field Taliban engagements. From a Special Forces kill box in Herat that erased 87 fighters in a single night, to a 24-hour engagement in Panjwai that left 94 Taliban dead in the fields they chose to mass in. This is the moment when the Taliban discover why not to stand in the open. August 6, 2002. A Green Beret and SEAL sniper element moving on foot through total darkness, climbing rock and loose shale to reach the high ground above a Taliban supply valley before first light. Chief Warrant Officer Randy Watt's team doesn't fire a single round on the climb. They mark distances. Every choke point on the valley floor gets a range card entry. 900 yards to the dirt track. 1,100 yards to the dry riverbed crossing. Every gap where a column of fighters would have to slow down, bunch together, and cross open ground gets a number. The valley floor is completely exposed. The Taliban moving through it tonight don't know that yet. But the snipers above already own every inch of it. The column is already moving. Dawn is breaking over the Kunar Valley. Below the ridgeline, the Taliban column is moving exactly where Chief Warrant Officer Watt's team predicted it would. Dozens of fighters, AKs slung loose, RPG tubes riding shoulders, PKM gunners walking in the middle of the column, weapons field stripped across their backs. They move in small clusters, spaced seconds apart, down the exposed dirt track, the same track already holding a range card entry. From above, the crosshairs settle. The lead element walks directly into the first marked choke point without slowing. Behind them, the column compresses where the track narrows, men bunching together in the open, nowhere to step off without dropping into the dry riverbed. They are unaware. They are already inside a geometry they cannot see. The crosshair settles on the column commander. One trigger pull. The shot travels over 1,000 yards of open valley before the sound reaches anyone below. The lead fighter drops mid-stride, no warning, just a man walking, then a man on the ground, and for one suspended second, the column doesn't understand what happened. Then the second shot fires. The fighter directly behind him collapses before the first body stops moving. Now the column knows. Voices erupt. Men spin, searching for an elevated threat they cannot locate. Some crouch, some run. Every direction is still open ground, the riverbed below, the exposed track above, nothing between them and the ridgeline but 200 meters of bare dirt. The geometry that killed their commander is killing them now just by existing. The snipers aren't done, they're just getting started. The column is already broken, but broken doesn't mean finished, and the men on the ridgeline know that. The RPG gunner is the priority. The only fighter below who can reach the high ground. Staff Sergeant Brian Bliss watches him hoist the tube onto his shoulder and squeezes before the man's feet are set. The RPG gunner folds. The tube hits the dirt unfired. The PKM crew is next. 2 men, belt-fed, trying to build a fighting position in open ground with nothing to build with. The first shot takes the gunner. The second takes his loader before he can reach the weapon. Every weapons crew that could threaten the ridgeline is being removed in sequence, like a checklist. The valley floor is becoming a graveyard. The last weapon on the valley floor goes silent before the echo of the final shot finishes crossing the ridgeline. When ODA team leaders radioed the after-action count, the number was unambiguous. 19 confirmed Taliban KIA, 0 coalition casualties, not 1 American wounded. The engagement lasted minutes. The fighters below never reached cover because there was no cover. The Green Berets and SEALs on the high ground had ranged every meter of that valley floor before the column entered it. That is what high ground dominance actually means. Kunar that morning was not a battlefield. It was a corridor with no exit and no ceiling, and the men who walked into it never knew the decision had already been made. But that was a small column caught by a handful of snipers. What happens when 200 fighters charge a fixed position in the open, expecting to overrun it before dawn, and the position doesn't fall? July 13, 2008. Near the village of Wanat, Kunar Province. 9 U.S. soldiers from 2nd Platoon, Chosen Company, 2503rd Infantry, are sleeping inside an unfinished combat outpost. The observation post is a shallow scrape in the ground. The perimeter wire is incomplete, and the outpost sits in a bowl. Flat open ground on every approach, mud-walled compounds ringing the edges like stadium seating. Staff Sergeant Eric Phillips knows the position is exposed. Every man on that outpost knows it. The Taliban know it too. 200 fighters have spent days positioning themselves inside those surrounding compounds and fields. RPGs are pre-staged at every cardinal point. They've counted the Americans, timed the resupply, and settled on one calculation: overrun the position before air support arrives. 04:2000 a.m. July 13, 2008. The first RPG round detonates before a single American can reach his weapon. Then, the tree lines, the compounds, the open fields, every direction erupts simultaneously. 200 fighters sprint toward the wire, counting on darkness and overwhelming numbers to close the distance before 9 defenders can organize. Their commanders calculated that open ground crossed at speed equals survival. They calculated wrong. Staff Sergeant Eric Phillips is already up, screaming positions, directing fire through the chaos. Muzzle flashes are coming from every angle, but every angle means every fighter is crossing open ground to reach him. The same fields the Taliban used to approach unseen are now the only path forward. There is no cover between the compounds and the wire, but the defenders are about to make them pay for every meter of it. The first Mark 19 round detonates before 35 kilometers west of the city. Sound. Specialist Tyler Stafford, bleeding from shrapnel, holds his position and keeps feeding the grenade launcher. Each 40mm round walks across open courtyard dirt in a straight line toward the wire. Fighters who made it through the initial wall of fire are bunched in the open field, nowhere to redirect and to crouch. Corporal Jason Bogar opens up simultaneously, his M240 burning through belts while bodies pile in the approaches. A javelin missile traces a flat arc across the pre-dawn dark and detonates inside a compound wall, collapsing the entire fighting position. The footage doesn't lie. Figures drop mid-stride, rounds chasing them across dirt they can't escape. 52 confirmed kills would be locked into the Army's own investigation report. The radio call hits the frequency at 04,047. 2 AH-64 Apaches are inbound, followed minutes later by an A-10 with its cannon already spooled. Below them, surviving Taliban fighters are still in the open, caught between the wire they couldn't breach and the fields they crossed to get there. There is nowhere to go. The Apache crews roll in first, 30mm chain gun walking across the approach routes in controlled bursts. The open ground that gave 200 fighters their speed at 042 now gives the gun camera a clean picture of every man still moving. Then the A-10 arrives. One pass. The GAU-8 tears a line across the field that no human being outruns. The Army's 2010 investigation documented what the gun cameras already showed. That strike sealed the count at 52. The soldiers who held that wire long enough for air to arrive would have their names written into something permanent. Sergeant First Class Leroy Petrie received the Medal of Honor. Specialist Tyler Stafford, Private First Class Gunner Zwilling. Their actions at Wanat appear in Distinguished Service Cross citations, naming specific weapons, moments, and specific enemy dead. Staff Sergeant Eric Phillips, who kept the Mark 19 running while wounded, is cited personally. They were sworn institutional documents listing what each man fired and how many attackers did not get back up. That is the institutional seal on Wanat. But confirmed kills in an open field engagement don't always belong to men on flat ground. Sometimes they belong to men clinging to a vertical cliff face, taking fire from above before they can even find their footing. April 6, 2008, Nuristan Province. 10 Green Berets from ODA 3336 step off helicopters onto a near vertical cliff face in the Shok Valley, directly into the guns of 150 Hezbollah-e Islami Golbuddin fighters waiting above them. The moment the birds flare over the rocky slope, the mountain erupts. Captain Kyle Walton's team hits the ground with zero cover, rounds cracking off stone inches from their boots. Exposed gray rock and muzzle flash pouring down from the compound above. Soldiers scramble for boulders, pressing flat against the cliff while fire from 3 directions stitches the slope around them. Less than 60 seconds on the ground and they are already completely pinned. But the fighters above are about to make the same catastrophic mistake every enemy on this list has made. They stay in the open. The slope is still smoking when the scale of what's above becomes clear. 150 fighters. Every window, parapet, and every ridgeline above the ODA is burning. Captain Kyle Walton's 12 men are stretched across 200 meters of exposed cliff face gray rock and the sound of rounds snapping overhead like whips. Staff Sergeant Luis Morales is already bleeding, still returning fire. For 30 minutes, there is no relief. The HIG fighters hold every elevation advantage, pouring AK fire, PKM streams, and RPG volleys straight down the slope. The geometry is perfect for slaughter. But perfect geometry cuts both ways. The same open compound terraces where those fighters are standing, reloading, moving in groups, those are about to become something else entirely. They are about to become a target. Walton's JTAC gets the first grid on station. F-15Es are already holding overhead. From altitude, the pilots see exactly what the ODA cannot. Compound terraces textbook exposed. Fighters bunched at parapets, moving between walls in the open, reloading in groups. The first strike hits the upper courtyard. The parapet pouring PKM fire into Morales' position simply stops. Then the second grid, then the third. Each CAS run methodically works down the compound levels, rolling fire toward fighters still pressing the slope. The geometry flips in under 4 minutes. The elevation that made the HIG untouchable for 30 minutes now locks them in place. Nowhere to run that isn't open sky and crosshairs. 6 hours. That is how long ODA 3336 held that cliff face. Direct fire, CAS, runs stacked in rotation. Gun runs working grid by grid across the valley floor and compound levels. By the time Captain Kyle Walton's team was extracted, the battle damage assessment came back. 117 confirmed enemy KIA. For a 12-man team pinned in the open, outnumbered 15-1, that number is almost incomprehensible. Every F-15E pass, danger close call, round Morales and the others put down range while wounded on that slope. It all accumulated into one of the most devastating single engagement body counts in Special Forces history. 10 silver stars. 2 distinguished service crosses. The citations themselves name names, round counts, enemy dead. And that is exactly what those citations say. Staff Sergeant Luis Morales, Silver Star citation. Expended over 1,400 rounds of machine gun ammunition while wounded, personally accounting for multiple confirmed enemy KIA from an exposed position on that cliff face. But if 117 confirmed KIA sounds devastating, the next incident didn't just exceed it. It nearly tripled it, and the Taliban walked straight into it on purpose. September 2006, Panjwai District, Kandahar Province. 1,500 Taliban fighters had done something no NATO commander expected. They dug into grapefield trenches, fortified mud-walled compounds, and occupied open agricultural fields in deliberate massed formation. Their commanders calculated that sheer numbers would absorb whatever coalition firepower came at them. They had watched guerrilla hit-and-run tactics work for years. Now, they wanted a stand-up fight. That decision, massing in open ground and waiting, was the single most catastrophic tactical miscalculation of the Afghan war. Brigadier General David Fraser commanded ISAF forces preparing to push into Panjwai. What he saw on intelligence feeds was almost unbelievable. Taliban fighters grouped in the open like a conventional army, holding static positions across exposed farmland. They had handed coalition air assets a perfect kill zone. But before that kill zone could be activated, Canadian infantry had to walk directly into it first. September 3, 2006, Charles Company, 1st Battalion Royal Canadian Regiment, moves across open irrigation ditches and grapefield berms directly toward Taliban positions in Panjwai. Major Matthew Sprague's men advance in the open, no meaningful cover, flat farmland in every direction. The Taliban are waiting. Within minutes, Charles Company is engulfed. RPGs detonate across the column. PKM fire rakes the exposed ground. Canadians take casualties fast. Soldiers go down in open dirt. Sections lose contact in the chaos. The advance stalls completely. Private William Cushley is killed. Others are wounded. The company fights to hold ground, not take it. They are pinned. NATO commanders watching the intelligence feeds made the call immediately. Conventional infantry pressure was finished. Unrestricted close air support was now authorized across the entire Panjwai kill zone. The Taliban had just triggered the response they never anticipated. September 9, 2006, Panjwai District. The Taliban commanders have watched Canadian infantry bleed across their fields. They believe the momentum has shifted. They order a massed counterattack. Hundreds of fighters push across open agricultural ground. Convinced numbers alone will collapse the NATO line. They are completely exposed. ISAF artillery fires first. Rounds walk across the fields in sequence, then the aircraft arrive. Fast movers and rotary wing assets work the same ground simultaneously. Fighters caught mid-movement have nowhere to go, flat farmland. The strikes run through the night and into Sunday morning. 94 Taliban killed in 24 hours, 4 separate incidents. ISAF's own statement confirmed it plainly. The counterattack was neutralized with severe losses. But killing fighters means nothing if replacements keep arriving. What happened next sealed the Taliban's fate entirely. Brigadier General David Fraser ordered every supply corridor around Panjwai sealed. ISAF ground elements choked the dirt tracks and dry creek beds the Taliban used to move ammunition, food, and water into their positions. It worked completely. Fighters already bloodied from the counterattack found themselves trapped. Flat open farmland on every side, ISAF patrols controlling every route out. Men who had survived the artillery and airstrikes began breaking, not from bullets, but from the inability to fight at all. A force of 1,500 collapsed, not because they ran out of courage, but because they ran out of everything else. That is what isolation on open ground does to a massed force. When Operation Medusa ended, NATO's own press statement made it official. 450 Taliban fighters killed in a single operation, stamped with ISAF letterhead. The number came back cross-checked against 4 separate engagement reports, coalition air logs, and artillery strike assessments. Brigadier General Fraser had sent 500 fighters into those open Panjwai fields against them. Less than a third walked out capable of anything. That agricultural ground around Panjwai became the single largest confirmed enemy loss count of the entire Afghan war on record. That is what happens when a massed conventional force chooses open terrain against an enemy that owns the sky. But Panjwai required weeks. What you are about to see next took minutes. 65 fighters crossing an open desert wadi with an AC-130 already in orbit above them. November 2010. Helmand province. Somewhere over the open desert, an AC-130 Spectre is already in orbit, and the crew has found something. 65 Taliban fighters moving in single file across a wide desert wadi. 4 kilometers of flat, exposed sand between them and the nearest cover. They are moving at night because they believe darkness protects them. It does not. Istar assets have been tracking this column for kilometers. Thermal imaging locks every signature. Weapons, bodies, spacing between groups, all of it painted in white heat against cold desert ground. The crew can count them individually. The fighters below have no idea the aircraft is there. 65 men walking in a straight line across open ground, directly into geometry they cannot see yet. That geometry is coming. The AC-130 Spectre orbits. Left-hand pylon turned, tight and mechanical. Wings banked at exactly the right angle to keep every weapon system pointed at the ground below. The crew establishes that orbit directly above the column. Now every gun is already aimed. The 25mm Gatling for precision. The 40mm Bofors for clusters. Fighters bunched together, weapon teams, anyone trying to organize. The 105mm howitzer for mass. One shell that removes a section of the column entirely. 3 overlapping kill zones. The entire column width covered simultaneously. Fire Control Officer Lieutenant Colonel Mark Deasons clears each weapon system in sequence. The geometry locks. The first 105mm round detonates at the column's head. The thermal feed goes white. When it clears, the lead element is gone. What remains are the runners. They sprint in every direction. Open desert in every direction. The Fire Control Officer works front to rear. The 25mm picks off the fast movers, lone fighters cutting laterally away. The 40mm hits the clusters, the ones who stop and bunch together, the human reflex to find safety in numbers. There is no safety here. Thermal signature after thermal signature, drops, stops moving, goes cold. 65 men crossed that desert believing darkness protected them. It didn't protect a single one. When the gun camera timestamp freezes on that final frame, the JTAC radio log is already running alongside it. The Joint Terminal Attack Controller on the ground called the count in real time. Every confirmation transmitted, thermal signature that stopped moving, logged. The DoD release footage carries embedded timestamps. The JTAC log matches them. 65 confirmed kills, single pass sequence. That is the institutional artifact, not a body count relayed through intermediaries. The footage and the radio log are the same record, cross-referenced and released. The gun camera does not lie about what it sees, but the number alone doesn't explain what actually happened. The Taliban moved at night specifically to avoid this outcome. That decision is what you need to understand next. The Taliban commanders believed darkness was a shield. It wasn't. The AC-130's thermal optics don't see light, they see heat. 65 bodies crossing open desert at night register exactly the same as 65 bodies crossing it at noon. That was the doctrine failure. Taliban night movement assumed visual concealment. The Spectre doesn't use eyes, it uses physics. Open ground is not neutral terrain. Without cover, distance means nothing. Speed means nothing. Darkness means nothing. You are simply a thermal signature in an orbit that has already calculated your position, your heading, and your next step. Every engagement in this countdown proves the same point. The killing floor isn't built by the weapon, it's built the moment a fighter steps into the open and believes he's safe. That is why open ground kills. If a mass Taliban formation charging open fields in Panjwai wasn't proof enough, watch it again. Subscribe if you believe open ground is a death sentence. Comment below. Did the Taliban's decision to stand and fight at Panjwai seal their fate the moment they left cover? Or was coalition firepower always going to find them regardless?